Hello, welcome to Cinema Savvy. I am Chris, and as you can probably see, I am flying solo today on this review of Game of Thrones. This is, of course, our weekly review show on Game of Thrones, where we're reviewing every single episode, talking in depth, giving our own spin, our own analysis and speculation on this current series. And this series has been a doozy so far, and this episode in particular is probably, alongside episode 3, I would say The Night King has been the most polarizing, and I think that this is going to turn a lot of people off when we get round to next week for the finale. So as I said, I'm on my own on this one. Hopefully we get some people in the chat so I have someone to talk about Game of Thrones too. I'm going to try and cover all of the bases. This is actually very difficult doing it on my own. I've had to come up with a plan for every single moment and character moment in the episode. That's usually Tate's job. And actually, it's a shame that Tate couldn't be on today's episode because me and him have very differing opinions on this. Before I get into today's episode, though, obviously, as I said, if you've got any questions, if you want to chime in on today's episode or Game of Thrones in general, please do comment along as I go through this video. Hopefully some of you get the notification when this thing goes out. There's a lot to talk about in today's episode. A lot of stuff went down. This is, of course, episode 5, The Bells, of season 8. Now, before I get into today's episode, I want to talk about the lead up to this episode because I don't think I've ever been more intrigued by an episode going in than I was in this week's episode. Now, George and Tate always tend to watch the episode. I know this is different for US viewers. JX, we've got JX in the comments. This is good. Have someone to talk about with Game of Thrones too. JX was actually originally going to jump on with me and help me out with this, but unfortunately he couldn't make it today, but it's good to see him in the comments. Now, George and Tate always watch the episode in the early hours of Monday morning for us in the UK. The episode, I believe, goes up around 2 a.m. And George sent this message to our group chat at 3:30 in the morning. He put, "Someone messaged me when they have seen it. Honestly don't know what to think about Game of Thrones." And then right after he follows it up with, "It was shit. That's my decision. George R.R. Martin should never have sold the rights or at least finish the books first. Spend 8 years watching for it to go kaput in the final season. He might have given them outlines but should have bloody written the books at least." So obviously, as you can tell, George hated the episode and it's completely shaken his love of Game of Thrones down to the foundations. Right after that, Tate replies with, "Absolutely no idea what you were talking about. That episode was phenomenal. Best of the season and one of the very best they've ever filmed. I am pissed off that I can't be on today's review. I could talk about this episode for over 2 hours. I guess that's as good a time as any to big up Thursday's show. Now, as you know, we always go live for Game of Thrones on Monday, usually 6 p.m. UK time. I know it's a little bit later, but I was at work and work ran over, and it was a very long episode of Game of Thrones today. Almost an hour and a half, I believe. So that's why it's slightly later than scheduled today. Brinsley in the comments, good to see you, man. And Brinsley, as Brinsley's just said, people are really mad about this episode. And I may be one of those people, but I'm not as mad as some people. And I'll explain my thought process why, although I understand why some people are. So as you can see, George loves it. Tate loves it. If you've been watching our Battle of the Brackets before, if you remember Ryan, who judged a couple of episodes for us, he even chimed in. He's on our group chat as well. He was once a massive Game of Thrones fan too, and he was chiming in on today's episode. He also didn't like it, and we all pretty much share the same problems. This is another one of those episodes where it's very spectacle filled, but when you read into the episode, and the biggest problem that I have with this episode is the characters. And a lot, and this is going to be spoiler filled, by the way. I should open with that, as always. This is an in-depth review, of course it's going to be spoiler filled. A lot of characters die, and for the most part, in the ways that those characters die, it doesn't feel earned. We've been watching this show now for the best part of 8 years. We've gone through tremendous character arcs and characters, and for a lot of characters in this, one especially for me, feels like a complete regression, and it doesn't feel earned. It feels like it's done for shock value, but you can have a character die. I'm not opposed to major characters dying. That's not where I'm coming down on this episode. Where I'm coming down on it is that their death should be fulfilling or have a point to the story, and their own personal stories as well, and their own struggles and their own strives, and characters evolve from season 1. And I don't think that that's the case. Yeah, Brinsley, as you've just put in the comments there, that's as good a time as any. Overall thoughts for me on this episode before I go into it piece by piece. I hated this episode. I have so many problems with this episode, and I feel like I've had a lot of problems with each of the episodes in this series. Maybe not so much episode 1 and 2. Episode 1 and 2 felt very slow. It was character building with the promise of something big happening. And whilst big stuff is happening, it's not hitting us it's not hitting us emotionally. It's not hitting us in a satisfying enough way where we can say that, for example, the Night King, going back to episode 3, that felt like a completely wasted story arc from this first scene of season 1 to that point. If you play those scenes side by side and all of the scenes in between of them, building up to that, was that moment earned? Did that have the same impact? Did it amount to anything? And in the grand scheme of things, no, it didn't. You can pretty much now remove all the scenes related to the Night King and the White Walkers, and in the grand scheme of the plot and where this thing's rounding off to, it won't have any single bearing on the plot. And I feel like that's going to be a case with this one too. JXC says that I enjoyed it. As I said, like, this is going to be one of the most polarizing episodes out there. I can understand. And believe me, this episode does have some good in it, although it's very, very small. Mostly from a technical standpoint is where I'm coming off on my positives on this episode, and I'll be sure to address those when we get to that point of the episode. Brinsley says, I enjoyed the episode, but I can understand why people have certain character issues. Absolutely. And that's a good jumping off point as any to start talking about the episode now. As I said, I'm going to go through piece by piece of this episode as usual. The people in the comments, you always tune in, but if you're watching this new, this is how we structure every single episode. We go through pretty much scene by scene and give our thoughts on it. So please get comments in as we go through this and we break it down. I'm going to go in order that things happen in the episode, because that just seems like the logical way to do it, in that there is this kind of building tension, ramping up to the final battle, or the final destruction, should I say, the final massacre. So we open with Varys talking to Jon Snow about taking up the line of succession. This has been something that's been building the last couple of weeks, with Tyrion and Varys talking behind the scenes about their conflicts as who is the rightful ruler of the throne, who is the right person to rule, essentially, who is inherently good and would steer the realms and the kingdoms in a good direction. Varys falling out of favor with Daenerys and favoring Jon Snow, and Tyrion somehow still favoring Daenerys out of blind hope. And this is the first character issue that I have, and the thing that follows this really rubbed me up the wrong way. Tyrion, for the longest part in Game of Thrones, has been the most intellectual character. He's, his logic, he's always favored logic over hope or his heart. And that's just been completely done away with now. Tyrion has become one of my most hated characters in the series. And it feels horrible to say that. For the longest point, he has been everyone's favorite character, certainly in the top 3. And inherently the fault of this series now, and when you're watching King's Landing crumble at the very end of the episode, I think that's an accurate visual representation of Game of Thrones in general. The problem is with, they might have outlines and stuff, but they don't have solid writing from George R.R. Martin. D&D, the creators of this series, what are their bloody names? David Benioff and D.B. Weiss. They just don't know how to write these characters. It's a lack of understanding of their characters. Even when they did have material there to work with George R.R. Martin, they didn't follow it. Season 5 with Dawn, for God's sake, like, that's still like the biggest thing that irks me the most about all of the seasons of Game of Thrones, is how they handled that Dawn storyline. So even when they've had material, they haven't chosen to follow it. But Tyrion, I don't know what the hell happens. So right after that, the scene we follow that up with is Tyrion snitching to Daenerys about Varys, that, Varys has been speaking to Jon Snow, he's stirring things up, he's committing treason, and like he acts surprised right after that. And there's this moment where he almost shares a friendship with Varys, like right before Varys is executed. He goes and like touches his hand and he says, like, it was me. He completely Judases Varys in this moment, and to me, like, I didn't believe that was in character for Tyrion. He acts surprised when Daenerys does. Actually, no, I don't even think he does act surprised. When you watch it, he kind of just stands by her blindly. Like, when this horrible atrocity is happening to Varys, a person he trusts, a person who is easily one of the most intelligent people in the entire show, he just stands by and watches Drogon burn Varys alive. And I don't believe that that's in Tyrion's character. The last couple of episodes, he's proven himself a really non-intellectual character. And I probably just used a very non-intellectual word there. But it just doesn't seem like a good evolution to the character to me. Like, how much more evidence does this guy need that Daenerys is an absolute tyrant, that she's going mad? The first part of this episode as well, like, we're told that, you know, Daenerys isn't eating, she barely sleeps. She's essentially got dragon sickness at the start of this episode. Like, she's completely disheveled and hell-bent on fury after the death of her handmaiden, Missandei. Which I'll get onto later with another character decision I don't believe was in Daenerys' character, where, you know, she's clearly filled with rage, but this much rage? This much madness? I don't know. That remains to be seen when we talk about that part of the episode. So I'm just going to have a look at some of the comments now. Catherine Slater in the comments says, dude, can I blow your mind? Chris, can I tell you what you missed in episode 5? I'm waiting on what I've missed in that episode, so please, by all means, tell me. Brinsley says they seem to already be focusing on other projects like upcoming Star Wars movies. Maybe the writing has suffered because of that. You know, that's a good point. I didn't even think about that. For anyone who doesn't know, I believe they've been given a trilogy of films by Kathleen Kennedy, the person who's sort of like the head honcho of Lucasfilm at the moment. And if you asked me, like, the first couple of series of Game of Thrones, would I be interested in that? Like, absolutely I would. But having seen their writing now, I honestly don't see how that's going to be any better than the last couple of Star Wars ventures we've had on the big screen. Catherine says, did you watch the behind-the-scenes episode on their channel of episode 5? No, I didn't actually. The stream that I watched it on, the episode, it obviously has the trailer for next week's episode, the season finale of Game of Thrones. And after that, it does have inside the episode, but I never tend to watch those. She's just told me to watch the video now. So I won't get to that now because I do want to carry the ball rolling on. But okay, you've given me a timestamp, so let's watch this in real time now. I do want to go back to the episode, though, as very quickly as I can. Whilst I'm doing this, let me know what you think of do you like where Tyrion's character's heading? Do you think that he's a compelling lead now? Do you think this was in keeping with his character to snitch about Varys? Because I really, really didn't like that. Okay, game revealed. Go to 5:17. So you guys are going to get my first time reaction here. Let me just get it to there. Okay. So I'm just watching it now. So he says, we enter into 5 with a broken down Dany. It's a 35-minute video, so I'm not going to be able to watch that, as I'm just going to be watching it and you guys aren't going to get context at home. So I will be sure to watch that afterwards, and hopefully that clears things up. But Varys is dead. Varys is straight out of this episode. A very, very unfulfilling ending to his character. I don't feel it was earned. I will say I do like the parallels of seeing Varys in chains, though, because it made me think of season 1, where he goes down into the dungeons to visit Ned Stark, who's in chains, and he's trying to tell him, I want you to do what's right by the realm. Oh, so Catherine says, like, that's because we're dealing with a broken down Dany. Yes, I get that, and I stand by what I've said. I do like what they've done with Dany this season, in that we are getting more of that Mad Queen angle. However, when we do get to that point of the episode, and maybe it's because of case that we've only got 6 episodes, it feels very rushed. And her turn, and I'll talk more about this in the live stream, her turn to murdering everyone, I don't believe was earned. I don't believe at this point her character would do that just because one of her handmaidens had died. I don't believe that she'll go back and betray all of her ideologies that she's had for 8 seasons now up until this point, just for that. Because essentially, what is she going to be queen of? You know, and she has that line earlier on. I'm going to be talking more about this later on, guys, but the bit where she says, like, I will not be queen of the ashes, I can't remember what season that was from. Guess what? She is now. That's not progression. Like, there's no reason for her to do that. It's just a breakdown in character logic, in my opinion. So we have Varys' death. Right after that, we have Daenerys following up with that, she wants to go balls out straight away. Let's launch an attack on King's Landing. Let's get this thing going. Even though that went so well the last time she tried to do it at the end of last episode, where she wanted to run in all dragons blazing, if you will. Look where that got her. It essentially, it killed one of her dragons. It wasted the majority of her Unsullied forces. She had a handful of troops. She's got one dragon left, and she's got the promise of Jon Snow and his Northmen. She completely lost that round, and she wants to do it all again just because one of her handmaidens had died. There is no bringing logic. There's no logic in this character anymore, which I kind of like, that she's not seeing sense and that she's being this tyrant of a character. But just that tipping over the edge point later on in the episode, I believe, was still too early, and there was no real reason given to her character for her to do that. Let's continue. So she says that she wants to launch the attack at the earliest the next morning. Let's carry on. So we learned that I'm sorry that this is a little bit stilted this time without Tate's involvement, without his plan. I'm just kind of going by my own, so I'm having to look at my own notes here. We hear that Jaime has been taken prisoner by Daenerys. On his way down to King's Landing, he arrived at the checkpoint, I guess, Daenerys' checkpoint, and was taken prisoner immediately. And Tyrion just easily walks in to his brother. She says, don't fail me again. If you fail me again, Tyrion, I'm going to kill you, essentially. Right after that, again, he goes to his brother, which is, you've got a couple of Unsullied outside standing guard. And he essentially uses the easiest trick in the book. He just goes, why are you standing here? Did you have direct orders from the Queen to stand here? And they go, well, no. And he says, well, I'm the hand of the king, so I outrank you, and I outrank anyone who gave you these orders. Stand aside. So then they all move away, and no one's guarding Jaime. I know he's in chains, but surely they must know what happens. They know of Tyrion's, relationship to Jaime, that he's his brother, that he would at least try something, that he would be feeding him information. And why wouldn't those orders come direct from the Queen? If, Daenerys hates Jaime Lannister, we saw that at Winterfell, although Sansa begrudgingly let him stay, and because of that, because of Brienne as well stuck up for Jaime in that moment and vouched for him. Daenerys kind of begrudgingly did it in order to curry favor with everyone else and not to stir anything up. But she hates Jaime Lannister. This is the guy that stabbed her father in the back and ruined their house. The Kingslayer. What's to stop him from doing the same again? She doesn't know. So why wouldn't she give her troops direct orders to stand guard and not let anyone into his tent? But essentially, Tyrion goes in and he formulates this plan. And this is actually one of my positives in the episode. This was probably... we are saying bye to Catherine Slater. I don't know if it's because she doesn't like my views on this episode. Let me just go back and read quickly. I know this is a little bit stop and start, folks, so apologies for that. Let's just see. So we don't really know what Catherine was making me look out for. The bit that I took it to was that Daenerys is just desperate, I think, was the only thing that I saw in the video. Are we saying that Daenerys is pregnant? Is she doing this out of some kind of pregnant hormonal bout? If it's very fucking extreme if that's the case. And God knows what that child's going to look like as well, if that child is what I'm assuming is Jon Snow's. But I thought at this point she can't be pregnant, right? Because of the stuff that happened in season 1. 517, it kind of looks like she has a baby bump. They haven't brought that up, and if they bring that up in the next episode, that just seems like too little too late. That seems like a huge plot point if they are going to drop that on us, that Daenerys is pregnant. They even did the whole Cersei thing, that she was pregnant, which, as we discover later in this episode, amounted to exactly diddly squat. So, just throwing her that she's pregnant in the next episode. Is Daenerys going to make it out alive in the next episode? Are they going to have to take her out? Because, for all intents and purposes, at the end of this episode, Daenerys is the one they kind of need to take down. But bringing it back, the scene that I actually really liked in this episode was that moment between Peter Dinklage and Nikolai as Tyrion and Jaime, respectively. It was a really nice moment between brothers, and when Tyrion points it out that Jaime has always been the one who's been in Tyrion's corner, He's always vouched for him. He's always like looked out for him when people are picking on him and just being horrible to him or even try to kill him. Jaime has always been there. He's been the constant in Tyrion's life when a lot of people haven't been, whether it be Shay, whether it be his sister, whether it be his father. It was a great moment. It was perfectly acted. And these are the moments of Game of Thrones that I love. It's these real emotional moments that feel earned. And this was a moment that at this point in season 8, it's why I've loved all the it's why I've loved all the character moments that we've had this season. Especially the moments from, episode 1, episode 2, especially episode 4 following the battle with the Night King. Those real moments, those moments that have been building, the bit with Jaime and Brienne, for example, stuff like that is what I really gravitate towards with Game of Thrones. And this was one of those moments. That was probably the only moment in this whole episode where I felt that kind of emotion and felt that bond between the two actors and the two characters. Tyrion formulates a plan for, he knows that war's coming and he knows that it's going to be an absolute slaughter, but he begs with Daenerys that when the bells of the city ring, will she please call off the attack? And, when the troops surrender, will she honor that surrender and let them live? Will she let Cersei live if she surrenders because she's carrying, a child, essentially? He formulates a plan for Jaime and Cersei to, get into a rowboat and sail across the water to Pentos, out of harm's way, to build a new life together. Which is a nice moment, is a nice thought, and it's nice that, even though Tyrion hates Cersei, he still does respect his family and he doesn't want to outright kill Cersei. He's definitely, he's on the opposite side. He's on the side that wants to kill Cersei ultimately, but he's doing everything that he can. Okay, sorry, I was just reading Catherine's comment there. He's doing everything within his power to maintain the safety and the life of his sister, even though he owes her nothing, and Jaime as well. He's trying to avoid conflict as much as possible, which is a really honourable trait. The big thing, and this will be the pebble that will start the ripple effect throughout the rest of this review, in my opinions on Jaime's character and where his character ends up by the end of this episode. Would Jaime care about starting a life with his sister? Yes, she's carrying his child, but as we've seen with Jaime, he doesn't care about his sister now. Sorry, I keep getting distracted by the comments. I keep looking at that. Okay, Catherine's taken off now. Thanks for tuning in, Catherine. Do appreciate it, and I will check that video out after I'm done with the stream here tonight. Would Jaime care enough to go back to Cersei in that regard? Bearing in mind, the last time we saw him, he gets with Brienne. It was a really happy moment for me. I've been shipping that since season 2. He could have stayed at Winterfell, but something called him to King's Landing, and the person that called him to King's Landing was Cersei. However, it wasn't in the way that I thought it was going to be, which ultimately, unfortunately, it turned out it actually was in today's episode. When he says that, Cersei is not honourable. I'm not an honourable man. I've done horrible things to people. It was with a sense that I need to finish this. Even if I don't make it out of this alive, and I probably won't make it out of this alive, I need to try and end and put a stop to this because I'm partially to blame for this. That's the impression that I got, in that, he came into this world together with Cersei. He loved her, but he realizes that she's got to go. He needs to kill her, and he needs to be the one to do it. It has to be on his terms. That's the impression that I got. And when he leaves Brienne at Winterfell, I thought it was due to, and Tate agreed with this as well, that it was done in order for her safety. He loved Brienne. He's moved on. He's a happier man now. He's dropped Cersei, but she's still there in the picture. And as long as she's still in the picture, he can't be whole. He can't be himself. He can't settle down or start a new life. And he let her down gently in Winterfell so that he could go and take care of this. And if he lived, great, he would come back. If he died, at least he took care of his business. But we don't get that impression in this. We get the impression that he still loves Cersei, even though she's treated him horribly. She sent Bronn out to kill both of them. Did he forget about that? She hired Bronn with a crossbow, possibly potentially to kill Tyrion more, but it was to kill both Lannister brothers, which I believe Bronn even mentioned that in the previous episode was what he was hired for. Why would he go back to a woman like that? And even the books, and I know that this has gone completely past the books, but where we leave Jaime, if I recall, at the end of the books, it is with the intention that he's done with Cersei. She writes to him for help. He's always been the doormat. He's always gone back there to help her. And, spoiler alert for the books, I think the last chapter that we've currently had with Jaime is where he reads for her It's when she needs a champion. It's a trial by combat, essentially. And she writes out to Jaime to do it. And he looks at the letter, he screws it up, and he throws it in the fire. And from what we can gather, that's because, you know, he's not going to go and help her. But that's not the Jaime that we get in this episode. We get like your first couple of seasons of Jaime. He has regressed as a character. His evolution, one of the best redemption arcs in anything I've ever seen up until this point, has just been completely squandered. It's almost like from those books, that piece of paper that's just been screwed up and thrown in the fire. That's exactly how I feel his character was handled in this. More to follow on that because a lot of stuff happens with Jaime later on. I'm just going to take a quick sip of water here, so I'm just going to read your guys' comments while I do so. Apologies, like talking very fast, and there's a lot to talk about. The voice needs a little bit of a rest, so I'm just going to take a break quickly here. Brinsley in the comments says, I think a lot of people expected Jaime to kill her. Absolutely, me included, and I think that would have been a much more fitting end. This is a problem that I have with a lot of things, mostly, and I know, again, this is another divisive thing to talk about, but Star Wars Episode 8, The Last Jedi. Subverting your expectations has become a big thing now following that movie, this season included, and great, but that's not good writing. If you subvert someone's expectations in a creative way, which helps the story, which still speaks to the character and doesn't jeopardize any person's character arc or cut it short or cut back any potential that may have happened, it's all well and good. But if you just do that for shock value and it has no point, then it's just lazy writing. Anyone could subvert anyone's expectations and just go like psych and do something completely different. That's not good writing. And I honestly think that Jaime killing Cersei, if that's how it went down, would have been a much more fitting ending for both Jaime and Cersei in general. I really do. And you could argue that that was kind of set up as well. Set up in a very different way. Now we've got hindsight with how this episode plays out. But what Brinsley says, did it break new ground? Nice Red Letter Media reference there. Absolutely. It broke new ground, unfortunately. So what was I saying? Yeah, in season 7, I believe it was set up visually. You could argue if you really analyze it and you knew your Game of Thrones stuff, the position that Cersei and Jaime are standing on that map that's been painted on the floor in the Hall of King's Landing. I believe that Cersei was standing on a patch of a bit of land, a region of the map called the Neck, and Jaime was on a patch of land called the Fingers. And people thought, oh, neck, fingers, he's got a metal hand, he's somehow going to choke Cersei and that's how she's going to die. He's going to be the one to take out Cersei. That's not the case. The only connection you can draw to that now is that that moment that they spend on that map together is ultimately the place where they die together, or they walk through. I don't know if, no, they don't die in that specific part, if I remember rightly, because I know they go into the crypts with the dragon skulls, and I can't remember if that map was painted there, if it was in a different point. Essentially, they walk past it. And that's your only connection to that scene now. I'm going to talk much more about that later on. I didn't realize how much I was going to talk about this. I'm going to try and keep the episode moving here because a lot more stuff happens. So we have Jaime being set free very easily. How he got past the rest of the checkpoint, I have no idea. He just did, clearly. Let's have a look. Okay, so we're getting on to the ending now. So battle happens. Let's just talk about the things. This is where all of my problems really start to compound on one another, which really made me hate this episode. I think I was shouting at the screen every couple of minutes or so at something stupid that was happening. So Daenerys swoops in. The attack is on. Daenerys swoops in on Drogon. We've got the Iron Fleet stationed outside Euron and all of the best Greyjoy men out there in their ships ready to take this dragon down. You've got the Scorpions across the wall, the causeway, the walls of the city, all around the perimeter. You've got these Scorpions, these ballista bolts aimed at the dragon. You've got the ballista bolts from the ships as well. And you've got the greatest fighters in all 7 kingdoms, the Golden Company. The Golden Company have been bigged up for like 2 or 3 seasons now. They've been mentioned. They've been hyped. Whispers here and there, like the Golden Company, they have elephants. We later realize they don't have elephants. Not that the elephants would have probably done them any good with how this falls out anyway. But they're essentially the best of the best. You've got Unsullied. They're even better than Unsullied. These are like the SAS, the Secret Service of just fighters and warriors in general in all the land. and they're taken out immediately within the first 20 seconds. I had such a problem with this, guys, and it honestly feels like it's either bad writing or it's a case of them distributing the budget to things they shouldn't. I spoke out before that I didn't feel that episode 3, The Night King, deserved to be a full episode, or at least needed to be that long. I think they could have cut that back, saved a bit of the budget that they spent during that battle. And there's a lot of things that just feel repetitive towards the end of this episode as well that could have been cut shorter. And that budget there, that render time, that CGI could have been put onto better things. I would have preferred to have seen full-scale battles in this episode rather than just city destruction, essentially. This is almost like the opening. I'm going to go back to Star Wars Episode 8, The Bombers, where I was just screaming at the screen saying, these are terrible. How are these a thing? Like, this doesn't make any sense. And when it's taking me out of the movie or the episode or whatever it happens to be, when stupid things are happening, stuff that completely contradicts stuff that's preceded it, and literally preceded it, the end of the last episode, we see Euron take down a dragon in 3 bolts. And I know that Brinsley and a lot of other people had a problem with that the dragon went down so easily. I didn't necessarily have a problem with that, and I explained in last episode because I have watched the Hobbit films where they do fire at dragons with ballista bolts. I can imagine that an instrument of that size could do some damage to a dragon if fired at that velocity out of a ballista bolt. I can imagine that. And, the bolt went through its neck, so that's a super critical hit right there. So I can imagine that a dragon would go down in 3 or 4 of those bolts. We also need to remember that at the end of last episode, we see right after Rhaegal's taken down, when Euron's fighting, when he's firing, at Drogon with Daenerys on it, there's like 20 or 30 bolts whizzing through the air coming at them. And, miraculously, Drogon manages to dodge all of those bolts, even though they're coming from like every direction. So please explain to me why Euron didn't use that tactic in this one. There's one dragon coming towards him. One dragon. And he's got that aim lined up perfectly. And it seems that not just him, but all of the scorpions on the walls, they're not firing collectively. One will shoot one bolt, miss, and then the dragon fire will come through and wreck everything. And Daenerys wrecks the entire Iron Fleet, which raises the question again, which I think other people raised last episode, sorry. If she could take them out that easily and she's flying directly to them, why couldn't Daenerys just take out the entire Iron Fleet at the end of last episode? Sure, one of her dragons just got took out and she might be playing, defensive, that she really doesn't want her one and only dragon now to be taken out again. But it must take a long time to reload a ballista bolt. Let alone if she's got the speed advantage here. If she flew around the back of the Iron Fleet, they'd have to try and turn their ship. Sorry. My throat's getting a bit hoarse. They'd have to try and turn their ships, and I think they even tried to do that in this episode. He says, turn the ship around. Turning a ship around is a very, very slow process, so they're not going to have the advantage in terms of maneuverability. They've got it in terms of, firepower, the ballistas, that these could pose a threat to killing a dragon. But they can't reload them that fast. So why didn't he just give everything he had to take down the dragon? Again, another thing that's been bigged up. Brinsley says the Scorpions got nerfed this episode. Oh boy, did they. But everyone got nerfed this episode. The Iron Fleet, again, the Greyjoys, the greatest seafaring province in the entire kingdom of Westeros, or you could argue like the entire 7 Kingdoms. Their fleet's been bigged up. We haven't seen a proper naval battle in Game of Thrones, and I've been dying to see one. How I thought this was going to go down was that we were going to have a naval battle. I thought that Yara was going to show up. We've heard that she reached the Iron Islands and she's become queen there, and she's gathered all of the remaining Greyjoy forces to her cause. I thought she was going to sail in at the last minute, this awesome heroic moment, and we were going to have this Pirates of the Caribbean style, naval combat going on. We were going to have Daenerys flying around on the dragon doing what she's doing, and then we were going to have this great land battle between Jon Snow and the Unsullied against the Golden Company and the Lannister forces. That's how I would have structured this. And I think that would have been better. As I said, cut some of the budget on some of those previous episodes. We don't need an hour and 20 of a fight against the Night King. That's just absurd. And, tack it onto this, use your budget more wisely, give the people what they want. And they didn't give the people what they wanted. The Iron Fleet's gone in 10 seconds, entirely gone, burnt to ashes. Euron survives, though. That's integral, and that will come up later in my discussion. The Scorpions, none of them, not the glam metal band, by the way. The Scorpions, the ballista bolts, all taken out straight after immediately. There is no opposition here. If these didn't pose this much of a threat last time, if these pose so much of a threat this time, they really aren't doing their job this time. And again, I'm watching all this play out, and especially later on in the episode where Daenerys is just laying waste to the entirety of King's Landing. Cersei could have ended this before any of it even began last episode. And this was the big thing that I talked about at the end of last episode. She had Drogon, a handful of Unsullied, Daenerys, Tyrion. She had all of her key players, bar Jon Snow and the Northmen. And after we see how good they do in this episode, like it would seem that the Lannisters would pretty much lay waste to them anyway. Cersei had the opportunity to just end and crush her, her adversary, her mortal enemy there and then. We've seen that Cersei is this completely merciless, uncompromising force up until this point in 8 seasons. And she didn't take that. Why did she do that? Just so she could stir some shit up and get Daenerys riled up by killing her handmaiden? And that's it? Like, no, that is not... Cersei is an opportunist. If she's got all her enemies there, she will just execute them there and then and be done with it, because then she won't have any enemies, and therefore King's Landing won't be burnt to the ground in this episode like it was. And she acts shocked about it, like, oh, I didn't see this coming. Of course you fucking should have seen this coming. Oh, boy. I need some more water, because I'm getting heated now, and this is where my problems of the episode really kick in. Right, let's see what my next point of. The Golden Company, again, bigged up for seasons, and they don't even fight. They don't even engage in combat at all. No swords are clashed with the fucking Golden Company. The dragon barges through. The dragon is like the Kool-Aid guy that crashes through the wall. Oh, yeah! And then it just burns them all. There's one remaining survivor, which is the commander, and then he just gets killed straight away. By the way, how did some of those Dothraki survive? I know that like 1 or 2 horses fled the Night King, but I thought most of them got killed. But there still seems like there was a decent amount of Dothraki on horseback here. Maybe that was just me. I think actually, no, they may have mentioned that a handful of Dothraki survived, even though we didn't see them necessarily ride away from that clash with the Night King. Brinsley says Varys was right. Yeah, no shit. But no one else can seem to see that this was going to happen. And when you can see it as a viewer, Game of Thrones used to be that show where it would shock you, where you genuinely wouldn't see something coming, but it would still make sense for the plot. If you've read the books, this isn't a good example because you know it was coming. But the Red Wedding is probably the best example of that. Ned Stark's death or the Red Wedding, where masses of characters are getting killed, subverts your expectations, but it's done for story and it works and it's so effective and it's so surprising. You don't have any of that talent here. You don't have that writing talent. You don't have those blueprints. And who knows? I mean, George R. R. Martin is revered for writing, rewriting, and being one of the biggest proponents of rewriting his own novels. He could write half of the next book, change his mind, scrap his idea, and rewrite the whole thing if he wants the story to go in a different way. So maybe if he did give them these outlines, and I very much doubt that he would give them these specific plot points if he really cared about the show. Maybe he's just trolling and he wants to do this as an act of, when I do eventually bring the books out, this is going to be the true ending. My books vastly outweigh the show. Or maybe these were some of his original ideas that he was playing around with in his head, but now he's gone back and changed his mind. Who knows? I honestly don't know. Or maybe he did give outlines to D&D and they've just completely doing their own thing, which stands testament to their writing ability, right? So let's continue here. Golden Company just laid waste to. That really annoyed me that we didn't get to see them fight. So essentially, the whole episode from here on in just becomes a fucking massacre. Like, there really isn't any sense of opposition or pendulum swings during the battle. You know, one side gets the advantage and then all of a sudden something else happens. This is just a straight up bloodbath. This is just a massacre from here on in. So eventually, as the episode goes on, the Lannister forces ring the bells. They surrender. Pretty much after all this destruction happens, very, very quickly, the Lannister forces are just like, look, we're surrendering. We can't compete with Daenerys on a dragon and all these forces that are getting laid waste to. We want to survive. Screw Cersei. And I think even Tyrion said that the people will turn on Cersei once they realize that it seems futile. Cersei doesn't ring the bell, by the way. That's very important to talk about with this. I'll also say that Cersei has been my favorite Game of Thrones character. I absolutely love Lena Headey. I always joke, only partially joke, that I want her to be my future wife one day. I find her character fascinating, and Lena Headey is such a phenomenal actress. She has been given nothing this season. We've hardly ever came to King's Landing. We've focused predominantly in the north in Winterfell. And any scene that we get with Cersei, especially this episode, she's pretty much just standing on top of a balcony looking menacing. That was how she ended last episode. It's pretty much what she does the entirety of this episode as well. She just stands overlooking the city, looking menacing. That's all she's done. You haven't given her any material to work with, really. You haven't given her character any time to develop. And even when we see her character die, if you did have sort of like any shred of sympathy for her character, because of the year we've had off with Game of Thrones as well, and we haven't really established much of Cersei this season, to have that such longer break and that distance from the character, it really does kind of distance yourself from her demise as well, and a lot of the characters' demises as well, I will say. So I do think that, Cersei, considering that she was sort of like the head honcho, the one we've got to take out alongside the Night King, and we all saw that happened, I had such high hopes for Cersei. I thought, you know what? First 3 or 4 episodes, we haven't got much of Cersei, but we've got like 2.5 hours left of this show, maybe 3 hours. That's where they can really hit it home. Give us a lot more Cersei, take her out in the final episode, and that will be earned. Like, I'll be okay with that. It's not perfect, and the 10 episodes down to 6 episodes really hasn't helped matters in that regard either. But we got nothing from Lena Headey in this, and it's such a shame because she's such a phenomenal actress. A lot of the people in Game of Thrones are great actors, and I just don't feel like we've really had much love with their characters in this. Brinsley says, I wish we had more episodes. A lot of it feels rushed now. You know what? I kind of agree with that, and maybe that's testament to how quickly things are moving and how rushed things feel. But with this writing, even with 10 episodes, do you really think that would have changed much? Do you really think that if we'd have had 4 extra episodes, we might have had more compelling conclusions to storylines and to character arcs? I don't know. With this writing talent, like, it seems like with the right writing team there, I think you could have made this into a very special season. Yes, you did have a lot of plot points that you had to kind of cut down, and maybe the amount of character deaths we've had in episode 3, although I felt like we could have had potentially more character deaths in that episode, and the ones we certainly had in this definitely feels like that whole streamlined thing. But when you've got 1 episode left, do you really need to streamline it that much? I don't know. Brinsley says we needed another season. You know what? If you elongated season 7 a little bit and you made that better paced, and you perhaps had episode 3, The Night King, be the finale of episodes of season 7, and you say if you did want to get rid of the Night King, if you wanted to kill the Night King, which was a foregone conclusion, I would have waited for that to end, season 8. But maybe if that had been the conclusion to season 7, and you dealt with all of the Night King stuff there and the White Walkers, and that threat was extinguished, and then you gave us a 10-episode season of charging towards Cersei, maybe that would have been better. Or maybe deal with Cersei in season 7 or something like that, and have the Night King be a big finale to season 8. There's going to be countless episodes. There's going to be countless shows and analysis and deconstructions on YouTube that you're going to find of how they could have rewritten Game of Thrones, how they could have made it a more compelling conclusion, bringing in all the plot elements and character arcs and everything like that, and making it a more fulfilling ending. And I think there's definitely going to be a lot here for upcoming screenwriters and writers of films or writers of television, if you're a budding writer, to see how you could have changed Game of Thrones, to learn what Game of Thrones, what it did wrong, and how you could write better things yourself. I definitely think there are going to be a lot of videos crop up of that, especially we've had a lot from episode 3. I think we're going to have a lot from this one, but certainly I think you're going to see a lot more of those videos crop up on YouTube once the season finale is done, because in all honesty, after how today's episode's finished, it's going to be a letdown. Like, I know it's unfair to judge an episode before it ends, but it's not going to end how we want it to end. It's not going to end in a decent way. I guarantee that, which is a real shame, because Game of Thrones has done so much for TV. When it's been great, when it's been amazing, it has been one of the best TV shows I've ever seen. In fact, on the group channel, we were even comparing it to the finale of Lost. Lost had so much potential. It had loads of characters. It had loads of character arcs. And when it gets to season 6, you just know that it's not going to be able to tie everything up properly. And indeed, Lost ended very anticlimactically. It's still probably my favorite TV show right up until that point. And it's just a shame that Game of Thrones has gone in the same direction. Let's continue here, because I know that I've been talking for a very long while now. Sorry, and I'm messing up my speech. I've been talking very fast. I've been talking a lot, so forgive me for that. So right after all the destruction and all the Lannister forces surrender, this is the moment where Daenerys flips, and I don't believe that this is in keeping with the character. This heel turn right here didn't feel earned. I like up until this point what they've been doing of portraying Daenerys as this Mad Queen, this slow build. And actually, I will say that's probably been one of the best things this season. I don't like the characters around Daenerys not realizing how she's becoming. I did like the stuff around Sansa and the heart-to-heart moments she had there, and that playing politics between, Sansa and Daenerys. They're smiling and they're trying to be happy families, but there's a lot more going on there because they know the underlying political intrigue. I hate the stuff they've done with Jon Snow and Daenerys. Even still in this episode, Jon is still snogging Daenerys. He knows that she's his aunt. And I think after that point, he should have distanced himself completely. But, clearly he's into that incest stuff. Like, I know that Daenerys is hot and everything, but, come on. If you got hit with that revelation, would you still do it? Don't answer that question, because I know some of you out there probably still would. Help me out here, guys. I'm going to pass over to you guys now. Cloudy has just jumped on. Good to see you here. She's put, you're reviewing this today. I haven't seen it yet. It's on TV this evening. Don't like your faces, though. Have a good evening. At least you tuned in. Thank you very much. And please, after you've seen this episode, do drop a comment on this video. I'll be reading the comments out at the start of next episode when we do our finale review. And hopefully we'll have Tate on for that one as well. But please, I do want to get your thoughts on this one, so please do get that comment into us. Brinsley, anyone, did you believe that Daenerys would turn this quickly? I feel like it was a betrayal of her character and everything that's been bigged up so far. We've seen a side to Daenerys that has been very compassionate. She's breaker of chains, for God's sake. She's she doesn't want to cause destruction. She doesn't want to be Queen of the Ashes. She wants to lay waste to Cersei, like she wants to go in all gun blazing Cersei, and I'm completely fine with that, and I understand that completely. And she is getting very restless and wants to take this throne, and she is getting a little bit impulsive. Even when she's killing people around her and incinerating people around her and becoming more like the Mad King, it still felt in keeping with her character. Even though I didn't like Varys' fate at the beginning of this episode, I can imagine she would do that to someone who now crosses her. But I don't see her laying waste to innocent women, children, and people of Westeros, because of King's Landing. Sorry, because if she wants to be queen, who's she going to be queen of? Who is she going to rule now? What is she gaining out of this? She's won. She's destroyed the Iron Fleet. She's destroyed the Golden Company. She's destroyed the forces that were attacking her. The rest of the troops have surrendered. They'll just bow down to any new monarch they have who shows the superior might, which is Daenerys in this case. All she needs to do, if she really wants to do it, is, against Tyrion's wishes, she could go and seek to kill Cersei and even destroy the keep if she wanted to. If she wanted to do that and have this image of a crumbled King's Landing, broken throne with the dragon sort of like standing astride it with her on its back and roaring out, that iconic image there of King's Landing destroyed, the people intact, you could still maintain that element they talk about where people are fearful of Daenerys. Like, say what they want. People didn't like Cersei, and here's the thing, we didn't really get to see much of Cersei as a monarch. Like, she blows up the High Sept, but we don't really get any sense of what civilian life is like. We don't know if they like Cersei, if they're fearful of Cersei, if they knew that she was specifically behind the attacks. I mean, we don't know. Like, what were people's impressions of Cersei? Like, once she did that, and once she seated herself in power and she caused that destruction, took out the entire religious opposition in her city, did the people embrace her? Did they like her? Was she kind of nothing? What was her policy like? Again, we don't see anything of this, so we don't really get much of a sense of what Cersei's like as a ruler. So let's say the people did fear Cersei and did hate Cersei, and Daenerys comes in, even like destroying the keep. That keeps, as Cersei says in the episode, hasn't been breached, hasn't fell. you know, people have died in its halls, but the actual building itself, that image, that thing that people might look up to, whether they think that the monarchy is inspirational or whether it's fearful, Daenerys destroying that would still be a moment that would make people fearful of her as a queen. So you could still maintain that, but it seems senseless. It seemed easy. It seems like we've got to make Daenerys the villain quickly, and we've got one episode to do it in. Let's just have her lay waste to innocent women and children, showing no remorse at all, completely bloodlust, completely just fire and blood. It didn't feel earned to me. It felt like we needed a few more episodes and something to get her to that point, if she was ever going to get to that point. Bearing in mind when we go back to season 2 and she goes to the House of the Undying and she has that vision of we were unsure at the point if it was snow covering the Iron Throne, if it was ash, but a crumbled building. We assumed it was ash or something. We assumed that something bad would happen, but that was the keep. I'm completely fine with Daenerys taking that down, but I just don't see her killing everyone and everything like that. Brinsley says, I expected her to head straight to Cersei in the castle, not burning all the women and children. It was completely out of character. It completely undermines anything they've been trying to do with Daenerys. It felt very easy. It felt very quick, and I don't buy it at all. To coincide with that, like, the Unsullied will follow Daenerys to the end. Even they, Grey Worm, who we thought would have some kind of emotional stake now that his love Missandei died, we really get the sense that he's just thrown that away. Literally throws the one possession that she has left in this world into the fire, distancing himself from that. Like, it felt like he was out for revenge, but like revenge against Cersei, revenge against the mountains, some revenge against the person that did it, not the Lannister forces that are just surrendering. Complete blind loyalty to Cersei. Right after this is one of the most funniest parts of the whole episode. Jon Snow is the most worthless character in this season. We thought he would be the prince that was promised. We thought that he might be the one to take out the Night King. Does sweet FA. And I feel like I've said that phrase now the last few episodes. I don't believe there is a more accurate phrase for what characters do in this season. It's sweet fuck all. And Jon Snow is the poster child of that. He stands around doting on Daenerys, realizing that she's horrible and really doing nothing to oppose that. So once he sees that all the Unsullied and even his own men are rushing in and killing Lannister soldiers that are surrendered, why would they do that? Like, they're under Jon Snow's command. Surely if he called them back, they wouldn't carry on fighting. They wouldn't get caught up in the bloodlust. They would see that this isn't, not an honorable thing to do. The Northmen, for the most part, we've seen are very honorable people and follow by rules and follow by leadership. There's none of that here. You might argue that some of them would still have some bad blood there with Lannister soldiers and the Lannisters in general, but to this point where they're killing people who are surrendered, I don't see them doing that. Jon Snow's calling his men back and saying, don't engage, don't attack. And then literally right after he says that, I swear to God, watch this in the episode. I'm not crazy on this. Jon Snow calls his men back and he's like trying to block them and stop them from rushing into the battle and killing people. The very next shot is Jon Snow killing Lannister soldiers himself. He kills like 2 or 3 soldiers right after. He's like slashing them and killing them and saying like, no, stop, we can't kill them. This is a horrible thing to do. And he's killing them himself. I thought that was hilarious. If anyone else picked up on that, please do let me know, because I thought that was hilarious. He also tells his men when the destruction's happening, he's telling his men to like fall back, like we need to get to safety. What safety? There are many points of this episode where it cuts to a bird's eye view, to a high vantage point where you can oversee the city. I think it's when we cut to Cersei, and we're seeing the level of destruction of this dragon. Where can you fall back to? There is no way to fall back to. There is fire everywhere. There is rubble. There is destruction. There is death. You can't go anywhere. So him just telling people fall back, oh yeah, great, because that's working so well for everyone else in the city until this point. Brinsley says about Jon Snow killing Lannisters, I saw that, but he was defending himself. Fair enough. I did still think it was funny, though. I think if there was a way he could do that without engaging, then fair enough. But okay, I'll let it slide. It came across as very clunky in the delivery, I guess, and then following it straight up with imagery of that. What else are we talking about here? So the destruction. I've been very harsh on this episode. I'm going to throw in my last positive on the episode. Maybe another one, I'm unsure on it, but my main one, it's shot beautifully. Like the destruction, it feels, this is way better than anything in the Hobbit movie with the destruction of Lake Town. This is what the destruction of Lake Town should have been in the Hobbit films. You really get that sense of hopelessness, of carnage, of people dying, of the mad scramble. Some of the shots in it are some of probably my favorite shots in all 8 seasons of Game of Thrones. There's a one shot with Arya as she's running through the town, and you know, if you're looking out for it, you can probably tell where the camera cuts and everything like that. But you're following her through the rubble as all this chaos is happening, and it's shot beautifully. Some of the cinematography in this episode as well is absolutely stunning. The framing of the shots and everything, it's top-notch stuff. It really is. So, you know, from a technical standpoint and everything like that, what pushing the boundary of what we can do on TV now, what we can do on the small screen. It is awesome. The cinematography is beautiful. Yeah, as Brinsley said, it was beautifully shot, and I think Tate said that as well, that it's one of the best looking episodes of Game of Thrones. I am not denying that at all. Like, the technical team behind this, they really have outdone themselves with this episode. It is just, you know, if you look past the spectacle and you look past the technology, which is fantastic, inherently what should be important as well is the characters and the character arcs and the emotion behind it. And I felt like that was the biggest thing that was lacking in this entire episode, and indeed most of season 8 of Game of Thrones so far. Okay, we're almost at the end here, folks, so I know I've been rambling for a long time. Hopefully, are you guys enjoying the show? Brinsley, let me know, are you enjoying it? Is this still okay? I know that it's not the same with me or you know, with me and Tate on here, but hopefully I'm still doing an adequate job of going through this episode. So please do let me know how you think I'm doing. Not because I'm just seeking validation here or need my ego stroking or anything, but yeah. Okay, we're almost there, folks. We're almost there. Okay, so the big thing. So Jaime is trying to get to Cersei at this point, and he comes across Euron, who survived the destruction of the Iron Fleet, because of course people need plot armor. And actually, I'm kind of glad that he survived, because I would have been pissed if, you know, he died on that Iron Fleet. And it's, you know, he's justified. He's saying that I fucked Cersei. Like, if I kill you, like, I will have killed the Kingslayer. I will bring your head back to Cersei. I don't see what he's... And this is really conflicting here, because he says a line which actually was one of my favorite lines in the episode. He says, "You hear that? That's the sound of a city dying." So right there, we also get the sense that Euron is a bit of an opportunist as well. Like, he's just cozied up to Cersei because he wants to be king, like he wants power and everything like that. When he sees that city on fire and dying, you think that he would jump ship. You think that he would, you know, sail away, recoup his losses, and maintain his survival. So when he says that the city is dying, he knows there's no hope. Yet in the next breath, he says when he kills Jaime, he's going to cut his head off and take his head to Cersei and let her kiss him. So he knows that Cersei probably won't survive this. He knows that he probably won't survive this. So I don't see what he was getting out of this. I don't understand the feud or anything like that. It felt like a needless boss fight, to be honest. It felt like a boss fight. Many of the moments did in this, especially Clegane, which we'll get to in a second. The two fight. Jaime gets mortally wounded. He gets stabbed a bunch of times, but not before killing Euron. Euron yelling after him like, "I beat you." I think he says, "I beat you. I killed you," or something like that. So we'll move on now to, let's get to Clegane. Like, this was one of the biggest things. This is another moment that was hyped up for a long time. And actually, I'll be interested to see what people thought of this moment, because you know what? I don't think it was handled as good as it could have been, but I don't have as many problems with the Clegane scene. George hated Clegane. He says that it's not even the best Clegane fight. The best Clegane fight that we've seen was Sandor versus Brienne, which I will agree with. I think that was in season 3. That was definitely a more visceral, more impactful fight to me, and I thought that was a better shot fight. This did feel slightly flat, but I guess just because it feels earned at that point, we have got to this point that I was still somewhat okay with it, I guess is where I'm coming it from. Nice character moment between Sansa and Arya, where he basically tells her not to follow him because, you know, look at me. This is where my life has led to, this is where life has led to me. This lifelong sense of revenge and leading to this point, and I don't want that to be your fate. And in that moment, you know, she agrees with him and she says, Sandor, first time that she calls him Sandor, thank you. In that moment, he is not the Hound. From this point here on in, he is not the Hound. He is Sandor Clegane. Really nice moment, good farewell. However, I will argue, do you guys think that that was a bit of a quick turnaround for Arya? You know, he's been trying to keep her away from this lifestyle for a very long time, but she's kind of been hell-bent on living this life of revenge and everything like that. Do you think that she came around a little bit too quickly, or do you think in that sense of destruction and witnessing that amount of death, she realized that it would be futile in her doing that? Or do you think at that point, if Arya thought herself that she wouldn't make it out of this city alive, that she would have nothing left to lose and she may as well go and have a crack at killing Cersei? Let me know what you guys think. The fight itself is fairly underwhelming. I will admit. I do like how it ultimately culminates, though. So, we need to talk about Qyburn. Qyburn gets straight up fucked at the beginning of this fight, which I thought was hilarious. Head crushed, thrown away, head splattered on the wall. Qyburn is out of this thing. Like, he is done. And Cersei has this brilliant moment where she's like, you know what? I'm not going to keep trying to like get Gregor Clegane back on my side. I'm just going to like walk down these stairs. Like, you two deal with this on your own. It's also interesting to note that the Hound doesn't try and take a swing at Cersei. Like, he is just staring down his let's just Brinsley says, sorry mate, something just came up. I will be back soon if you're still going. That's cool, man. Take care. I'm going to be carrying on anyway. Like, if you are back, do tune in. I'm probably going to be going for like another 15 or 20 minutes or so. But I appreciate it so much for tuning in, man. As always, thanks for commenting throughout this thing, and hopefully catch you in a bit. So right off, and I do have a problem with this as well, and I get why it's done, because it's done for the prospect of making it more cinematic. Gregor kills Qyburn so easily, and then when we get to the fight, apparently he can't kill Sandor that easily. When Sandor's down on the ground, it's like the Terminator thing, right? Like, a Terminator could kill someone in a heartbeat. Like, they could just punch someone in the chest, they could cave their skull in, but every time they're just throwing someone around the room to elongate the fight. And that's what it felt like with this one. At any moment, Gregor could just like stand on his brother's head. He could crush him. He could, you know, he could do exactly what he did to Qyburn at any moment, and he doesn't, because we need to drag the fight out a little bit. Essentially, it boils down to the Hound, you know, he knows that he's almost beaten. In a last bout of strength, he managed to stab his brother in the eye, and then he knows that he's not going to take him out. Why doesn't he try and swing at his brother's head, though? I will say at that. Why doesn't he try and cut his head off? He keeps going for the body, even though he's heavily armor-plated, and he can see that he's clearly undead. Why not try and decapitate him? I don't know why he doesn't try and go for the head. But the Hound rushes at his brother. The two go over the balcony in a beautiful shot, actually. Probably my favorite shot of the whole episode is them two free-falling together into a pit of fire at the bottom. Very kind of poetic ending to the Hound, in that he was born of fire, essentially. That's where his revenge and his hatred for his brother came about, and that's how ultimately he gets revenge on his brother there, by falling into a pit of fire, consuming himself but also his brother. I thought that was quite a nice ending, actually. Would I have liked to have seen the Hound survive? Yes. Did I think that he was going to make it out of this season? Probably not anyway. So as endings go, I was okay with that. We have Rapreg in the comments. Greetings from Germany. Wow, we're going to international on this thing. Thanks for tuning in. Please do get your comments in as well. What did you think of this episode? I'm at the very end of the episode right now, talking about a few things, but please feel free to chime in on anything I'm talking about. So that's the game ball. So after that, we get these elongated scenes of Arya just running through the city. Very nicely shot. However, I did think it was a little bit dragged out. Perhaps I think maybe you could have perhaps shortened that spectacle and devoted it more to character moments and actual dialogue, which would have been nice between characters. Also, we keep cutting back to like that random civilian mom and her child. I guess they were trying to bring some kind of more personal identity to the civilians in general and their plight to stay alive. I did think it was a bit random and a little bit unnecessary, but it was essentially Arya trying to keep these people alive and witnessing the death around her. And then the last thing I need to talk about really is Jaime and Cersei, which I've already talked about at length. I thought it was a complete backpedal for Jaime's character. He has regressed back to the loving relationship. Like, you know, he's there in the crypts. They try and get out. They're blocked in. She starts crying, saying, I don't want our baby to die. I love you, Jaime. I love you. And he says, like, nothing matters than us. I guess Brienne didn't matter. I guess she was just a one-night stand. I guess he just wanted to break her in, I guess, and that was it. Everything his character was building to was just dropped completely, and it's such a shame because Jaime is easily one of my favorite. Was one of my favorite characters in Game of Thrones. One of the greatest redemption arcs, what his character was building to, even to the majority of this season with Brienne, like where that culminated. If this had have ended where he goes to kill Cersei, but he dies in the process, that would have been a much more fitting ending to the character. As such, his character feels wasted. If you go back now to season 1, and even as you're watching his redemption arc, did this amount to anything? Is this a fulfilling ending? After 8 years of Game of Thrones and watching it and being a diehard fan of it, was this the best they could do for the character? And I'm sorry, but the answer's no. A lot of stuff now we're getting to the ending, and you kind of look back in hindsight, it does just feel completely pointless. It feels like, why have I been invested in all of these plot threads up until this point when you're not going to pay them off in a satisfying way? I love Cersei. I love Cersei and Jaime, some of my favorite characters, but even Cersei's character, how she kind of regressed in these moments, I don't necessarily have a problem with that. Like, if she'd have tried to play the innocent maybe and play the sympathy card on Jaime, but he just saw past it, he's tired of her shit, he's tired of her games and how she's used him all these years, and he killed her in those moments. That would have been a very powerful moment, but essentially the two just get caught in the collapsing of King's Landing, and that's it. That's their characters done. I was expecting a much more powerful ending for Cersei. This is something I've actually been playing an idea with, but now I've seen her ending to this, I don't even think I would, because I love Cersei so much. I love me some Lena Headey. As I say, I always joke, future wife one day. Stand by that. I want to do some kind of I wanted to do some kind of video tribute to the character. I did a little bit of a character tribute to Littlefinger at the end of season, I think season 7, wasn't it, where Littlefinger died. You can find that on our channel. It's a video called To Kill a Mockingbird. That was a very emotional moment for me because Littlefinger was my favorite character up until that point. And I don't appreciate the ending he got, so I did a little video tribute. And after this, I kind of might do one for Cersei as well. I might get working on that, sort of like a little video tribute to Cersei Lannister and probably Jaime as well, I guess, the two of them together. The two of them probably deserve some kind of video tribute. If you guys would like to see that, please do let me know and I'll get on editing that in my free time. The final shot is Arya emerging from the rubble, and a random horse is there. The most convenient horse ever, just happens to be there, unscathed, saddle, bridle, everything reigns, ready to go. Is this Bran wogging into the horse? Did he realize that Arya would need him? Probably not. It's probably just a convenient random horse that's there. Arya makes it out alive. Maybe she's the sole survivor. It seems that way. And that's it. And she rides off into the distance and the episode ends. Next week's episode just looks like Daenerys has seated herself on the throne, and that's pretty much the only glimpse we get into next episode. So I've been talking for a very long time and I kind of want to round off now, but final thoughts on the episode. It just ends on a real whimper. It doesn't seem to conclude anything that we've come to expect from Game of Thrones in a satisfying way. A lot of characters die, but I honestly didn't feel any emotion when characters were dying. Maybe with Varys a little bit, but even I have my problems with that as well in the lead up to his death and how that came about. It feels almost completely nonsensical now at this point. Nothing feels earned. It feels very rushed. It feels like we've just kind of got to cut to the chase now. And all of this great build-up that we've had for, like, some may argue 4 seasons. I hated season 5, but season 6 was very good. It feels wasted. I love the spectacle of this episode. It was a very beautiful looking episode. The technology in it, the CGI, everything was completely on point. But what matters is the character and where characters have led up to. And it didn't end that way. Pepe the Frog has just chimed in just as I'm about to round off. Jon kills Dany and Bran takes the throne. I'd be cool with that. Maybe if there's a moment at the end where it turns out that Bran is actually the Night King and that mark that's on his arm turns him into the Night King, and it's like that, you know, the Michael Jackson Thriller video where he turns to the camera at the end and he's got the yellow eyes. Maybe he turns to the camera and he's got blue eyes, and it turns out, well, the Night King actually did get himself on the throne and no one knows. Who knows? Who knows how it's going to end? But I do know that it's going to end very anticlimactically and not how we wanted. This kind of did feel like a finale in many ways. This felt like the big ending, and then next week we're just going to have an hour or so of fallout and try to patch things up. And that's what Game of Thrones has come to, I guess. Whether we will get a definitive ending with George R. R. Martin's books, whether we will get The Winds of Winter, whether we will get A Dream of Spring, I don't know. I like to think we will, and I just hope at that point that it's better than this. But yeah, I'm going to round off. I've talked to ad nauseum. Pepe the Frog, says D&D stands for Dumb and Dumber. I think you're giving them way too much credit there, because Dumb and Dumber is one of my favorite movies ever and is probably one of the best written comedies I've ever seen. But I hear what you're saying. They have driven this show into the ground. And I mentioned this earlier in this review, this analysis. The crumbling of King's Landing and its destruction felt like a very accurate visual representation of Game of Thrones in general, just crumbling. And that's how I felt. Seawood Man says, damn, your room is dark. Well, I'm matching the visual tone of pretty much every single episode of Game of Thrones. I need to take off anyway. I've talked at I've talked at such length at this episode, and I've probably been very rambling. Hopefully, I know that Tate wasn't on this show today, but hopefully I managed to hold the fort okay. Hopefully I managed to cover everything in depth as I can. So thanks for sticking with me. Thank you to everyone that has tuned in. If you do want to see us talk more on this episode 5, The Bells, I believe me and Tate are going to try and get something together on Thursday. I did want to get this out now, so it's our regular scheduled episode. Thursday will be more of Tate's side. It will be almost like two sides of the coin, if you will. This was me being very negative on this episode. Tate absolutely loved the episode, so it will be a nice little dynamic shift there. I'll be listening to him and getting his viewpoints on his viewpoints on things. And we'll get like a nice little back and forth there. So it'll almost be a episode 5.5, if you will. And then next week, Monday, hopefully 6 p.m, we'll be back for the final ever episode of Game of Thrones. Episode 6, A Song of Ice and Fire, as I believe the title's called. And we'll be doing our review on there. And I'm sure we'll have a lot to say on that as well. So thank you, everyone. Really do appreciate it. More stuff coming on the channel, the more movie reviews. I'll be seeing John Wick 3 this week, my most anticipated movie of 2019. Look out for reviews on that. Trailer reaction as and when they come out. I do need to jump on a reaction for the new It trailer that came out. So look out for all that. If you're new to the channel, if you've just discovered us, please hit that subscribe button, hit the bell icon as well. We tend to do a lot of these live streams very sporadically. So as soon as that icon comes up, you know we're going live. And until the next episode, if you're looking for more Game of Thrones, look out for us on Thursday. And until then, I'll see you guys next time. Thanks for watching.